Imagine a world where the most dangerous place was not the battlefield, but the royal bedchamber. Kings and queens, crowned with glory, entered their ornate beds not to find rest, but to face poison, betrayal, or death. These beds, carved with gold and draped in velvet, were not symbols of luxury, they were traps, soaked in intrigue and fear. Behind the curtains, lovers plotted, rivals schemed, and the soft linen sheets became shrouds for monarchs who never rose again. This is not the tale of warriors who fell with swords in hand. It is the darker story of rulers who perished where they thought themselves safest. This is the untold history of royal beds more dangerous than battlefields. The hall is silent. Torchlight trembles along carved stone, stretching shadows that creep across the chamber walls. A young queen, scarcely 14, stands at the edge of a towering bed. Its canopy looms above like a crown of wood and gold, its silken curtains heavy with the scent of incense. She has faced no battlefield, yet tonight she is a soldier. Her weapon is her womb, her body the prize of kingdoms. The bed before her is no refuge. It is a throne in disguise, a stage upon which dynasties will be written. To modernize, a bed is a private thing. But in medieval and early modern courts, privacy was almost non-existent for royals. A king's bedchamber was a political theater. The ceremony of going to bed could involve dozens of attendants, chamberlains, bishops, ladies, in-waiting, physicians. The sovereign's body was never his or her own. It belonged to the realm. To undress the monarch was a ritual, a privilege, even a mark of status. Nobles would compete to fasten or unfasten a royal's cloak, remove their shoes, or draw the bed curtains. To serve at the bedside meant closeness to power and power itself. Imagine standing there as a courtier in Louis XIV's France, where the coucher, the king's nightly ritual of going to bed, was a spectacle performed before the highest-ranking nobles. The Sun King himself would lie beneath embroidered sheets as dozens bowed, whispered, and jostled for position near the royal mattress. What happened within those sheets was a matter of state. A mistress might ascend to political influence if chosen for the night. A queen might win or lose her standing by her fertility. And all of it, the sighs, the whispers, the rustle of silk, carried the weight of empire. The royal bedchamber was not unique to Europe. Across the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan's bedchamber was the most guarded space of the Topkapi Palace. The Sultan slept surrounded by eunuchs, men castrated to ensure loyalty and obedience, who formed the impenetrable wall between ruler and assassin. Yet even within this fortress, the Sultan was vulnerable. Poison could be laced into the pillows, strangulation cords hidden beneath silks. Indeed, for many Ottoman rulers, death did not come on horseback, it came while resting in the bed that symbolized supreme power. In Mughal India, the emperor's chamber was both luxurious and perilous. The famed peacock throne dazzled the world, yet it was the emperor's bed that determined dynastic survival. Every night was a gamble. Would a concubine bear a future heir, or would rivals poison the silken sheets? Entire factions rose and fell on whether a child was born, and from whom. For these rulers, to sleep was to stake their dynasty's claim upon history. Even in Ming and Qing China, the emperor's bed was sacred, a stage for carefully controlled rituals. Emperors rotated among consorts according to strict schedules, their nightly unions recorded by officials in secret logs. The dragon bed was a site of cosmic order, believed to embody harmony between heaven and earth. Yet behind this order lay chaos. Eunuchs maneuvering for favor, consorts vying to bear the next son of heaven, whispers of poison mixed in food and silk. A single night in the dragon bed could secure centuries of imperial succession, or plunge the empire into deadly rivalry. And in Japan, the shogun's sleeping quarters were often built at the heart of castles, heavily guarded yet filled with constant anxiety. Intrigues brewed, daggers glinted in the dark, and assassination attempts were as much a part of palace life as any banquet. Across the world, the royal bed was not simply where rulers slept. It was where they were tested, betrayed, and defined. Perhaps the strangest and most unsettling aspect of royal beds was how public they often were. In medieval Europe, consummation of royal marriages was not a private act. Nobles, bishops, and attendants might escort the bride and groom to bed, bless the sheets, even remain nearby as proof that union had taken place. Without consummation, the marriage could be annulled and entire alliances dissolved. Picture a trembling young queen, barely more than a child, lying beneath the weight of expectation while outside her chamber door nobles whisper, listening for sounds that would confirm her role as both wife and queen. The bed was a battlefield of flesh, where innocence was bartered for legitimacy, and the silence of one night could spark wars. The royal bed was also the place of endings. Kings and queens often died in their beds, their final breaths witnessed by courtiers who jotted down every detail, eager to claim legitimacy for the heir who would succeed. These deathbeds were crowded theaters, filled with bishops, nobles, and rival claimants. The monarch's last words, their gestures, even the direction of their gaze could shape the fate of a nation. One could argue that the battlefield tested courage, but the bed tested legacy. For in that chamber, lives began and ended, alliances rose and shattered, and empires trembled with every whisper of silk. Let us return to our young queen. The hour is late. Outside, the feast continues, goblets clinking, laughter echoing down cold corridors. But in her chamber, silence reigns. She lies stiffly beneath embroidered sheets, her hands trembling, the weight of her crown heavier than ever. For her, the bed is no comfort, it is a prison of velvet and wood. And though no swords clash here, her heart pounds as if she were standing upon a battlefield. This is the paradox of royal life: to wield crowns and scepters in public, yet to be powerless in the most intimate moments of all. The battlefield claimed soldiers. The royal bed claimed kingdoms. The royal bedchamber, a place meant for rest, was, more often than not, a battlefield of whispers and shadows. If the bed was the throne of life, it was equally the throne of death. Here, poison dripped more readily than wine, daggers gleamed in candlelight, and assassins crept behind velvet curtains. Kings and queens learned quickly that no matter how many soldiers guarded their castles, their most dangerous enemy might be the one sharing their bed. For medieval and Renaissance monarchs, the canopy bed was not merely a luxury. Heavy silks, intricate carvings, and gilded posts shielded them from drafts but also created the perfect stage for murder. Above the king's head, assassins could hide deadly powders or drip venom through the seams. At night, silken curtains closed the royal bed into a dark cocoon, suffocatingly private, and it was within this enclosed world that rulers often drew their last breath. One story comes from Renaissance Italy, where beds were so closely tied to power that nobles gifted them as political favors. A duke, it was whispered, never trusted his bed. Each night he ordered servants to strip the sheets and test them with silver pins, for fear of poison dust sprinkled across the fabric. The pins would turn black if touched by arsenic. Sometimes he refused to lie beneath the canopy at all, preferring a wooden bench nearby, believing death was waiting just above his pillow. Perhaps the most terrifying form of assassination was not the sword, but the sheet. In an age before chemical detection, poison was the invisible dagger. Royal beds, with their constant attendants and shifting hands, became prime targets. Powdered arsenic or crushed belladonna could be sewn into pillows, rubbed into blankets, or dusted onto the mattress itself. The victim would slip beneath the covers, inhale the sweet poison, and never awaken. Legends tell of kings whose beds became their graves. In France, whispers claimed that poison-laced sheets were sent as wedding gifts, a silent threat disguised as luxury. In Russia, Tsars feared courtiers who presented them with bed linens, for even the softest silk could conceal the harshest death. But sometimes, poison was not hidden in sheets at all. It was woven into the very air. Curtains soaked in toxins would release fumes as the monarch slept. What seemed like peaceful slumber was slow suffocation. To sleep in such a bed was to march unknowingly into battle with an enemy you could not see. Yet the most dangerous threat was not always an unseen hand. It was the person who lay beside you. Marriage, after all, was rarely about love. It was about power, territory, and heirs. And where there was power, there was betrayal. Consider Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France. Long rumored, whether rightly or not, to use her knowledge of poisons to rid herself of rivals. She was accused of lacing bedsheets with venom, of sending perfumed pillows soaked in toxins to enemies. Whether myth or fact, the very idea was enough to strike terror in the hearts of courtiers. Who could lie safely beside a queen whispered to have turned her bed into a laboratory of death? In the Ottoman Empire, the dangers of the royal bed reached even darker extremes. When a new sultan ascended the throne, it was customary to strangle his brothers with silk cords, often in their own chambers, sometimes even upon the bed itself. The bed was where rivalry ended, where survival was purchased by the death of one's kin. A brother might share bread and laughter one night, only to wake to the silken cord around his throat by morning. Even the most powerful rulers could not escape the dangers of their beds. Henry VIII of England, though not murdered, nearly died several times in his chamber, crushed beneath the weight of his own enormous body as ulcers festered and fever consumed him. His bedchamber became a place of rot and paranoia, where whispers of poison never ceased. Every goblet, every sheet, every attendant was suspect. Others were less fortunate. In Eastern courts, rulers often feared their concubines, who might be bribed to deliver death during the most intimate of moments. One emperor was said to sleep with a dagger beneath his pillow, a last defense against betrayal from the very women chosen to serve him. His paranoia was not unfounded, for in the labyrinth of palace politics, the hands that caressed you by night might strangle you by dawn. Royal deaths were rarely private. When a monarch died in bed, it was witnessed, recorded, and immediately politicized. Deathbeds became crowded theaters, where courtiers jotted down every breath, hoping to use it as proof of divine will or legitimacy. Did the king speak the heir's name before the end? Did the queen confess her sins? Every gesture mattered. But not all royal deaths were natural. Many who gasped their last upon silken pillows did so with eyes wide in horror, struggling against poison or writhing beneath invisible assassins. And while the battlefield left bodies strewn in daylight, the bed left corpses shrouded in secrecy, where only whispers and rumors told the tale. The queen lies beneath her embroidered canopy, candlelight flickering on velvet drapes. A soft perfume lingers, strange yet sweet. She breathes deeply, exhaustion heavy upon her. Outside, courtiers murmur, guards shuffle their feet, but within her chamber, silence reigns. Hours pass. Her breath grows shallow, her lips pale. The perfume, she realizes too late, is poison. Her attendants will find her at dawn, still and cold, beneath the silken sheets. The empire will wake to morning, but only a few will know that her bed was her battlefield, and her death a silent victory for her enemies. The bed, then, was never merely a place of sleep. It was the throne of desire, the altar of dynasty, and the most dangerous battlefield of all. If the royal bed was a chamber of death, it was equally the cradle of power. Wars were fought, treaties sealed, and kingdoms reshaped not only upon battlefields but within the folds of embroidered sheets. The canopy and mattress bore witness to both the agony of childbirth and the ecstasy of forbidden love. In the end, the history of dynasties was written not only in blood spilled on fields of war, but also in the struggles and secrets born between bed curtains. Few images were more symbolic of royal power than that of a queen laboring in her chamber, surrounded by witnesses. Unlike common women, queens were not granted privacy in childbirth. The bedchamber became a theater, crowded with courtiers, clergy, and physicians, all present to ensure the legitimacy of the child. The queen's agony was public, her body transformed into a vessel of dynastic continuity. In France, queens gave birth in specially designed beds that could be opened on 3 sides, allowing nobles to watch the delivery. Privacy was stripped away in the name of politics. Every groan, every drop of sweat became evidence that the heir was indeed the queen's flesh and blood. A cry from the royal bed was not merely the cry of a child, it was the cry of a future king, the lifeline of a dynasty. But childbirth in the royal bed was fraught with peril. Mortality rates were staggering. Queens often died from fever, hemorrhage, or prolonged labor, leaving behind fragile infants who themselves rarely survived beyond childhood. For every heir that lived, dozens of women and children were lost to the unforgiving dangers of birth. Thus, the royal bed was not only a chamber of power, it was a tomb of queens. In many courts, queens were judged by their ability to produce heirs. A barren queen was as dangerous as a barren field useless to the crown. Henry VIII's 6 wives are perhaps the most infamous example. His bedchamber was not merely personal but political, a place where the fate of England's religion and monarchy was decided. Anne Boleyn's inability to bear a male heir sealed her death warrant, as did Catherine of Aragon's. The royal bed became their executioner, as surely as the scaffold. Whispers often painted queens as cursed, bewitched, or punished by God if they failed in childbirth. Behind the grandeur of jeweled canopies and embroidered pillows lay the terror of women who knew their lives depended on what their bodies could deliver. For many, the royal bed was not a sanctuary but a trap. Where there was power, there was betrayal. Royal beds were not only sites of childbirth but also of scandal. Mistresses, lovers, and rivals often invaded the sanctity of the chamber, leaving behind illegitimate children whose existence threatened dynasties. The French court under Louis XIV was a labyrinth of intrigue. The king's mistresses wielded enormous influence, their place in his bed granting them privileges and power equal to ministers. The queen, meanwhile, slept alone in her gilded chamber, her position secure only so long as she bore heirs. The royal bed was thus divided between 2 worlds, the lawful bed of the queen and the passionate bed of the mistress. Both shaped the fate of France. Scandals could topple empires. Rumors of infidelity were enough to delegitimize heirs. Queens accused of adultery faced ruin, for if a child's bloodline was questioned, the stability of the realm crumbled. The bed, then, was not simply a place of intimacy, but a throne upon which dynastic survival rested precariously. Yet the royal bed was more than a stage for individual dramas. It was the foundation of empire itself. Each heir born upon silk sheets meant the continuation of a dynasty. Each child who died meant instability, rebellion, and sometimes war. The succession crisis of the Spanish throne in the early 18th century leading to the War of Spanish Succession can be traced back to royal beds where fragile children were born only to perish. The Habsburgs, one of Europe's most powerful dynasties, were undone by their beds. Generations of intermarriage, designed to protect bloodlines and dynastic purity, instead produced heirs weakened by genetic disorders. Charles II of Spain, last of the Spanish Habsburgs, was so deformed and sickly that his bed became a prison. He was unable to produce an heir, and upon his death, his empty bed became the spark that ignited a continental war. The chamber was heavy with silence as the queen labored on her bed, sweat matting her hair, her cries echoing against the gilded walls. Courtiers leaned forward, breathless, waiting for the proof of an heir. At last, a child's wail pierced the air. The midwife raised the infant high, crimson and screaming, while scribes recorded the moment with quills scratching furiously, but joy was fleeting. The queen's breath faltered, her skin turned pale. Within hours she was gone, her body claimed by the very bed that had just delivered the future. The child was king, but the queen had paid the price. This was the cruel paradox of the royal bed. To give life, it demanded death. To secure power, it demanded sacrifice. By the 18th and 19th centuries, royal beds grew less dangerous, yet their symbolic power endured. They remained stages of legitimacy, scandal, and dynasty. To this day, the beds of monarchs are displayed in museums, silent reminders of the secrets, betrayals, and tragedies they once held. The bed was never just furniture. It was a throne draped in velvet, a battlefield shrouded in silk, and an altar upon which history itself was written. So why were royal beds more dangerous than battlefields? Because while battlefields claimed soldiers, beds claimed kings. While wars reshaped borders, beds determined dynasties. Behind closed curtains, more crowns were gained and lost than in 100 bloody wars. And so we remember, the sword may carve empires, but the bed decides their fate. The bed of a king was not a sanctuary. It was a battlefield where desire, betrayal, and death slept side by side. This is the story of crowns forged in shadows and of dynasties destroyed between the sheets. If you found this untold history gripping, don't let it vanish into the shadows. Subscribe for more forgotten stories, like the queen who risked everything on her wedding night, or the bizarre secrets of medieval medicine. Share this with those who think history is only written in wars. Remind them that sometimes it was written in the silence of a royal chamber.